Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for coming here today, this afternoon, and spend a few moments with our multiple author, Rhoda, and she's also so nice as to have brought some of her articles that she is writing for the Huffington Post. And so I'm hoping to get to know Rhoda a little bit more. It's actually anybody who really wants to get to know her very closely can look at her two books that she has published just recently. The first one is entitled Rhoda, Her First 90 Years. So you kind of get the sense of her spirit already. And then, to be a little bit more going into the detail of things, she says, after 90 what? So for anyone who thinks that at 89 they're getting on with age, reconsider that just by having read those books. So Rhoda, Cheryl said so nicely, we share a common passion of lifelong learning. And maybe just for our audience, can you, if you were going to say a few things about who you are, and maybe we can even start with right now and then trace it back, or who is Rhoda? What's the essence of Rhoda?
I'm a rebel. And this modus operandi of revolt and nonconformity started very early. I was the unwanted sixth child. My mother was 40, and my father was 50 when I was born. And my mother had no idea that she was going to be saddled with another child at her age. And I think that from early on, I was determined to do things my way. And I think that probably drove everybody nuts, because I remember my mother saying, ugh.
Not again.
Why am I cursed with this child? But it was a very strengthening point of view.
Oh.
So, yeah, I think kind of person I am is one who questions, who's actively involved in politics and in feminism. I guess
maybe just, if I can just go quickly, because I don't want to lose that point.
All right.
So here you start by saying you were the sixth child and not really wanted. So that's a lot of adversity, and we live in a very psychologically oriented culture where we often speak about, did you have a good childhood, and we need to take care of that inner child, and if you weren't very well raised, then we have all kinds of problems throughout the rest of the life, and you better go and start seeing a therapist at the age of 12, because otherwise those damages will... So what happened? I don't know, who was your therapist at 12?
Well, let's see. When I was 12, the year was 1930, and we were in the Depression. And there was a big family conference, and my mother had everybody bring their bank books and see where we were and how much money we had. Well, I thought I was going to have to quit high school and go to work, which is what happened to my two sisters, my two oldest sisters. My oldest sister was 19 when I was born, so she was old enough to be my mother. And then my sister Jean was the next one. And I was scared that I would have to quit high school. I didn't want to quit high school. I liked it. And so that idea at age 12 in 1930 was a sense that I had been released somehow from the worst part of the depression. And then, of course, there's my brother and my older sisters. And my brother kept telling me, you're never going to amount to anything. You're never going to catch up to us. Well, of course, how could I? There's always this gap. You can never erase that period of years. But I think it was the challenge that was constantly put before me. You're not going to make it. We're so far ahead of you, you know, no matter what grades you make and so on. And I think that was a challenge.
So actually, that constant tease that was in front of you, you're not going to make it, you're not wanted, you may have to quit high school, there's a lot of adversity, the depression was a really difficult period, right? And yet you made it through all of that, and are laughing at your young age of 93 and how many days?
Well, I don't know. I'm on the way to 94, which I'll be in February. And the psychological aspect of who you are and who I am is not really correlated with what our bodies say. I mean, I ache all over, and I have to walk with a walker. And so I'm constantly readjusting to the fact that I cannot do what I used to do. So what's important to me as I look back on my life was the necessity of saying, okay, this is how it is. Where do we go from here? And that, I think, is a sustaining impulse, because it carried me through high school writing, and I always wanted to be a writer.
It actually carried you all the way to today, because you're still asking, after 90 what? So that very basic question that 12-year-old, 8-year-old was asking and had to deal with, here it is. 80 years later, you're still doing it.
That's right. That's right.
So that, in some ways, that attitude is carrying you through, because I know many elders that can also emphasize all the things that are just not working. You just talked about your body, but yet, you know, you're seeming to emphasize something else at the same time, besides just the body aching.
Well, like, what the heck are the alternatives?
Oh, right. Say something about that. What are the alternatives?
Well, my next door neighbor said, my mother's in her 80s, and her body's fine, and her mind is going. Which would you rather? Have a mind that's functioning and a body that's falling apart? And I said, well, do I really have a choice? So, the other thing that strikes me is we have this illusion that we are in control of our lives. I think it's an illusion. Mm-hmm. And that what we have to learn to do is to say, okay, here's where it is today. What do I have to do to get through tomorrow? Mm-hmm. And at this point, there are several things that are really the same. Mm-hmm. The aging part of our lives is not all that different. When I was a teenager, which is what I point out in one of these articles, mm-hmm. I was full of angst. Who am I? Nobody pays any attention to me. I'm invisible. where am I going? All those terrible anxieties. Well, you move on, and they're either with you or they're not. Usually they stay, but somehow you change. Okay, so here we are at what they call in France le troisième âge, the third age. Childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. And anybody over 60 is a member of this third group. And the attitude is, yeah, okay, here you are. What are you going to do about it? Which is where that idea, after 90, what? There are no rules.
But Rhoda, but you say that so nicely, and yet we live in a society, as you know all too well, and one of your articles even talked about it very powerfully, about ageism, that basically has an idea that anything after 60 is kind of a major declinist phase, that it would be so much better if we had developed this anti-aging drug that would stop us right there so we don't go further down. So here you are, rebel as you are, and trying to tell us, change your attitude?
No, I don't think you can. You can if you want to, but your attitude can destroy you.
Oh.
You can, I have a friend, her mother, she said her mother was 85 and didn't want to see any of her friends anymore because she didn't want them to see her as she was today, but she had this image in her head of how she used to be. Well, that's sad.
That's sad.
That's sad. I look in the mirror and I think, oh my God, there is an old face. And that's true. So what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Not much. One of the things that I have learned is that, okay, it goes back to a story about frogs. And
about frogs?
Frogs.
Frogs.
And the moral is never, but never give up. There were two frogs who fell into a tub of cream in the farmer's cellar in the Ukraine. And they swim and they paddle and they paddle and paddle. And one frog says to the other, I'm so tired. I can't
keep paddling.
I can't keep paddling. And so the other frog says, you gotta keep paddling or you'll drown. Okay, so they go round and round and round and round. And he says, I'm sorry, I can't do it. So he gives up. So all night long, the other frog paddles round and around and around. In the morning, the farmer comes to check up on his cream, and what does he find? Freshly churned butter. And sitting on top of the butter is the frog. So if you keep paddling, you'll survive. It may not be fun, but there are rewards. I used to go to ACT.
The acting or
the repertory theater in
right.
San Francisco. Well, they redesigned the place and the gallery. The seats are so close that my legs got numb. So I ended up buying fewer tickets and sitting on the main floor. All right, well, again, it's a matter of adjustment.
So say something, Rhoda, if I can, because you made that amazing statement, it's about attitude, right? And so now I don't want to forget the culture we live in, where already at 20 and 30 we become so concerned about aging. And here you are, almost 94, and are saying, hey, it's an attitude, right? And it's you got to deal with it, right? So what changes would you like to see, or what would you like to tell that 20 or 30-year-old from your perspective, so that we can take something from your long life and your experience?
I would like to see an acceptance that aging is not a disease. It's not. And yet physicians tend to treat us as if we were sick and we need to be repaired. That's what I mean by attitude. And unfortunately, when we are presented with this kind of attitude, we tend to internalize it. This is what happens to slaves. They internalize the idea of being a servant to someone else, and they accept it.
And then act it actually themselves. They become that what they are constantly thinking about. So, but is there something, Rhoda, you would say that obviously these books you have just written a few years ago, and you become an author and a writer and a
journalist,
really. So would you say that there is something, because that's also kind of reminiscent of the age-stone philosophy, that there is something where you are continuing to learn, and that's something that you know today you wouldn't have known at 60 or at 30, so that perhaps that 20 or 30-year-old has something to look forward to rather than dreading every day as every day I get older and less valuable? To a statement, certainly as a therapist I would like it, if people could welcome each new day, because it's just such a pity if you don't, right?
Right.
I mean, it's just such a waste in some ways.
It's a very interesting point that you've made, because something that has been with me all my life is that the nature of the creative process, we are hardwired for creativity. And you yourself, I think there's this book called Gems of Wisdom.
The Gems of Wisdom,
yeah.
yes. Mm-hmm.
And that is right along with my philosophy, that if we acknowledge the creativity within ourselves, we will be better able to handle the changes. This idea that after 60 things change and you're no longer interested in sex and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's so wrong. I was 72 when I met the love of my life, who was 85. He was a Frenchman, and we met through his son. I was teaching at university at the time, linguistics. Well, teaching teachers how to teach English as a second language. And we met, and it's a very amusing story, and it's on my website also. It's called Why Not? He lived in Santa Rosa, and he was slightly deaf, had a wonderful sense of humor, and we met for lunch at the Frank Lloyd Wright building in the Marin Civic Center, and he invited me to stay overnight at his condo. He said there were had a separate bedroom and so on and so on. And I said, well, sorry I had to teach, but, you know, maybe some other time. Okay. The following week was Earth Week, Earth Day. And we went to Bodega Bay Art Show. And there was a gorgeous rocker handmade rocker of walnut.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in love with it. So we came back to his apartment, his condo, and I said, and the next morning I said, you know, I can't get that rocker out of my mind, but it's $3,500, and that's what it costs to go on a trip to Russia with a group of teachers. And Peter said, that's all right. We can always go to Russia. You can always go to Russia, and I'll go with you. Call him up and make an offer. So I called up the guy, the artist, and I said, I'm enchanted with your rocker. It feels so marvelous. But I want to make a deal with you. How about if I give you $500 down and $100 a month for 3 years? And he said yes. And I was so excited, I grabbed Peter and I gave him this big hug, jumped up and down, I did it, and Peter grabs me, holds me closer, gives me this fantastic open mouth kiss, and then pulls back and says, let's go to bed. It was only 11 o'clock in the morning, so I said, why not? And that was the beginning of an 8-year fantastic love affair. So this illusion that the sexual drive ends at 60 is not, you know, it depends on who you are.
So Rhoda, but then I do have to ask you, so if that is universally correct, which I certainly believe, that we don't stop being sexual being, intimate being, and I've heard stories before of people in their 80s and 90s having their best love affairs, like you're just confirming, then we are back to what is stopping millions and millions and millions of elders in this and many other countries from having these amazing experiences. Because if I can just say, as a youngster, you know, I don't really have much time, but finally when you get to be more older, you have all this time and to do all of these amazing things, and yet I find so many of our elders kind of having resigned to, I don't know, something. So
life is over, yeah.
So what happened there?
Well, part of it is, in the U.S. anyway, the worship of youth. We think that we have to stay young. We have to buy creams that will take out the wrinkles. We have to act as if we're 25 instead of 60.
Right.
It, again, I'm not quite sure what it is, except that it's something that our society tells us. Again, like my brother, you're not good enough, you're never going to make it. Once you have passed your youth, your opportunities for growth and change don't exist. And that's what we have to change. That's what our educational system has to change. Now, the opportunities that are available for you and me and other people in the public schools as coaches for reading in the elementary school, helping kids who have problems reading well. There's a fantastic program. And if you have the energy to put in an hour or two, whatever.
You're talking about engagement.
I'm talking about engagement.
To stay engaged. Say something about, to the youngsters here in the audience, say something about what can they look forward to as they are growing older?
I would even ask you that. What do you look forward to? Do you look forward to security? Do you look forward to an increase in wages as you go? Do you look forward to doing the kind of work that you really want to do? Courage to maybe become a musician or a writer, whatever, it's tough because everything in our society is geared to money. So when we're young, we think, oh, you know, I better do it now because I won't be able to do it later. That's not necessarily true, and yet it is true.
So what if you were, with your rich life experience, helping us shape a society that would embrace the full spectrum of life, right? You're like your life of being a rebel, of continuing to grow and reinventing yourself, really. How would that culture, what values would it have? What changes do we need to slowly make? And I know it's not an overnight effort, but what can we all do collectively to slowly change this culture that embraces elders as a resource and as something to look forward to rather than a liability that we have created now?
Okay, well, again, it has to start early. If we believe that we have a chance for only one career in our lives, we're going to limit ourselves. But if we can teach young people that the job they start out with if they get through college or high school or whatever, is not necessarily the one they're going to end up with when they're 50, 60, or 70, relax. You will learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. That is a message that we don't get. There's all this emphasis on success and notoriety from being the top this and the top that and the competition.
You remind me, just since Steve Jobs just died, the
Oh,
Apple
yes.
founder, and he emphasized that when he was fired from Apple in 1985, that experience of being fired was the most transformative experience for him in his life. That huge, what he at that time considered a dismal failure, the very company he had founded, let him go, turned out to be the major motor or the major impetus for his then following success. So that's very timely that you emphasize that as well.
So we're coming back to what you said earlier about attitude, and that he had a choice. He could go out in the garden and eat worms, or he could pull himself together and figure out what else he was going to do.
Right.
Somewhere, somehow, this man was imbued with the sense of taking a chance. And I think being a risk taker is one of the most important things we can do. Even as elders, we take a risk. We need to reach out to people. I'm not quite sure how it would work.
Well, we do, if I can just say that, Rhoda, I mean, I do think that since we are not in control, as you said so nicely earlier, and we live in this soup called culture that continually is telling us, as elders, you are no good, we of course internalize as elders that we are no good, we are not useful, we don't have much to offer or anything to offer anymore. We just better play golf or do bingo or who knows what, right? So that attitude is an attitude out there in the mainstream that needs changing as much as we do as individuals, right?
Well, now, one of the things that you're doing here at Age Song is that you have created a community of people who get strength from each other. We are social beings.
Yes.
And in the culture that we live in encourages us to think of ourselves as individuals. An individual cannot survive alone.
Right.
We are social animals.
Right.
And part of what we need to do is to connect with each other and support each other, as well as the society in which we live. I think we have to say, hey, pay attention. I'm still here. Mm-hmm. I'm still a creative, energetic person, even though my energy lasts only 15 minutes at a time. Mm-hmm. It's still there. It's tough.
It's tough, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I feel that being socially connected in a support group like setting is really important for us not to slip in the old ways. Because I have a moment of energy, I want to do something, and then I think, oh, well, what good is it going to do, whatever. But if we have someone that says, yes, let's do it together, right? That would be really important, right? You know, so that I do think building communities and then also having this wonderful, refreshing attitude that you have of taking risks, of saying I'm going to stay engaged, and I'm not going to take in the mainstream idea that I'm useless, that I am diseased, that I have nothing to offer anymore, that I have gone over the prime of life at whatever it was, 40 or 30 or 18, and there's nothing anymore that I have to give, that we have to counter that, right? And this, I think, through your books, and I love your title, you know, Her First 90 Years. I mean, we have just barely begun, right? You just started. And to even ask the questions, after 90 what? So what is after 90 now? What are the next careers that you're planning?
Well, I'm in it.
Oh, you're in it. That's right.
The epilogue in the first book says, the book is finished, but I'm not.
Uh-huh.
And what I did was, and of course I self-published because I sent out hundreds of manuscripts to publishers and so on. And when I had enough rejection slips to paper a wall, I decided I would self-publish. Well, I discovered that after 400 pages, the price goes way up. So my editor and I had to cut. But what I decided was that I wanted to learn to write plays. So what I did was I immediately, which is what I always do if I'm going to start a new thing, I joined a class. I signed up for Berkeley Rep School mm-hmm. Theater, and boy, it was a 6-week intensive course, and it was one heck of an effort, but I produced a 10-minute play, which was read. And that encouraged me to join a weekly group, support is what we're talking about, called the Play Cafe. And everybody in this group are younger than I am by 10, 20 years. And lots of men and women, but nobody cut me any slack for being old. I presented a couple of scenes, or I had a play, something, and they would just tear it apart. And it was that kind of acceptance that made so much difference to me. Right. Like, I wasn't being catered to because I was old.
Right.
If I was with that group and I couldn't perform, well, come on, you know, this is what you need to do.
That's right.
So then, that wasn't really enough. I joined Stagebridge. Have you heard about Stagebridge?
Yes.
It's a fantastic group. If you will join Stagebridge or invite them to come, storytellers here, you can learn to act. And this is another very interesting thing. You can put yourself out of yourself into something else. It's very, very interesting, very stimulating, and gives you a different insight when I was teaching teachers how to teach English as a second language, I had them use puppets so that the people struggling with a new language could talk through the puppet. And then they themselves were not subject to criticism, to rejection, and all that stuff. And anyway, Stagebridge has a class in playwriting. And so I joined that. It's on Mondays from 1 to 3. And I had to acknowledge the fact that I really should not be driving. I mean, I can, but it's not a good idea. So
You still have that Ferrari, the convertible?
no. Now, that was only one brief time. But I found a man in the class who was willing to come pick me up. So once again, I had to declare that I was vulnerable. I wanted to take the class. It was not a good idea for me to drive myself. And it works out fine. So now he picks me up, drives me home, and this is a whole new career.
So what is this play going to be called that you're going to be writing on?
Oh, I've already written 4. I'm working on the 5th. They're all different subjects. And one of them has to do, the teacher said, choose a subject about a ritual. So that made me think of a ritual that I had attended in Korea. Once a year, the Koreans, and I was the only Westerner who was privileged to do this, you take an old piece of underwear, whatever, pants, underwear, slip, whatever, and you go with other people down to the River Han, and you build a fire, and you throw your old underwear into the fire. And this, it absolves you of all the terrible things that you've been doing your life.
Oh, what a great point. That's a great image.
And this kind of ritual, I find, is many different cultures.
Good.
do
I
this.
have some old underwear lying around. That'd be good. That'd be really good.
And then we took rice and threw it into the river. And then there's money in Korea called WON, 101 night. Then you take a thing and thread it through the money and let it float down the river. Well, I was very impressed with that whole idea of the ritual and getting rid of the guilt and so on. So this play that I wrote has to do with an older woman in a retirement place, and her son comes to visit, and she says, I have to talk to you because I'm dying, and I have to tell you that I murdered Mr. Jackson. And so then the thing evolves that she has this guilt all her life of having contributed to this old man's death. But it's her need to feel responsible for all these other things. And he keeps saying, no, Ma, an old guy.
So Rhoda, when you say that, I'm so much reminded of how important it is, and certainly that's also some of the passion that we would like to continue here or see actualized with H-Song, that there is more of that cross-generational learning, right? That you are, as an elder, can be in contact with the younger ones, and that we can learn through each other, right? You can learn the latest in whatever is going on out there, and they can learn that depth of wisdom or
right.
life experience that you have garnered throughout all these decades, right?
See, and so what I think is important is for us not to feel that we are blocked by circumstances or things, there are opportunities out there. As long as we realize, look, we don't have to stay awake for 8 hours. We can take 2-hour naps if we need to.
Oh, so this is important. So what you are actually also saying, you said it a little bit earlier, where we can make use of 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be the whole whatever day. But I think it is basically a constant reconceptualizing of what we want to do during a day, how we live the day, how fast we go, how slow we go, right?
Yeah.
And we keep measuring ourselves by that adult way. And I know that 85-year-old who's still jogging across the Golden Gate Bridge in order to show that he indeed is still as strong as the 30 years old, right? So if we keep measuring ourselves with that standard, we're going to feel less than, always.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So we are not paying, because that wonderful statement of the troisième âge, the third age, is actually saying that we are entering an age that's very independent of the second age and the first age, and we should let go in some ways of those ideas and constraints and images that we have from those earlier ages, because they really hinder us going forward in life.
Well, and you know, when I was 25 or 26, I felt older than I have felt at many other times in my life.
Right.
Because I had read about Alexis de Tocqueville, who, a French writer, at the age of 25, he wrote this incredible book commenting on the United States.
Right.
And I thought, I'm a quarter of a century old.
And what have you done?
What have I done with my life?
There's a German, Büchner is 23, is known, he was a compatriot of Goethe's time, and he's known to have said, I'm 23 and I haven't done anything yet for eternity.
That was exactly it.
Yeah.
So again, this is one of the things that we internalize in our society, and I think we have to move beyond it.
Right.
And this is one of the reasons I think I'm so pleased with Stagebridge. They send us out into the community to schools.
Yes.
And help to teach children, 4th and 5th grade, how to be actors and how to recite and how to sing. And this, I think, is a very important way in which to bring in our connection to the larger community.
Mm-hmm.
So,
again, this whole idea of staying engaged and feeling useful in a sense of we have something to offer to the community, to the children, to the younger generations. And it is important what it is that you have to offer. If you could maybe just say, before we're coming to an end, what are some of the qualities that you feel you have now that you are happy about having as a human being, values or qualities of being that you didn't have when you were younger?
well, I think I'm less hard on myself. When you said after 90 what? Okay, that book has a play in verse, poetry, philosophical musings, and kind of thoughtful thinking over what has been going on. And, you know, I'm not quite sure how to answer whether there is an answer. I think each one of us has to decide what we want to do now and take each day as it comes. Now, we know that as we age, our senses change. Our sense of taste, our sense of smell is not what it was. Our hearing, you know, we add hearing aids, glasses, but there is one sense that doesn't change, and that's the power of touch. And I think we have to be aware of how important it is to touch each other. And there's no reason why you can't learn to give massages to each other. And there's a sense of, even getting your hair washed is an incredible sensation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Somebody massaging your head and shoulders and so on. I think we need to go past the inhibitions that have been imposed on us, the expectations of the society. They're not reasonable. They're not sensible.
Reach out and touch someone.
Absolutely.
There we go.
And hug somebody.
That open mouth kiss is going to stay in my mind for a while.
Forget about a tree.
That's right. Hug each other. Yes. Any more, since we're coming to an end, any more things that you feel are important? I mean, it almost feels like I want to say, let's start an elder party or an elder revolution, that you could be like Jeanne d'Arc, in the front, riding here. I would certainly follow you. That's right. The rebel is loose. What she's up to now. Rhoda Curtis, the first 90 years. My goodness. But it does seem like we need to somehow make some changes in the culture and society, have more of you people that are, not wanting to go silently into the night.
Well, any of you who were active politically in your youth, there's no reason not to still be active politically right now. If you want to change the world, join moveon.org, and I don't know how many of you have computers or are interested, but there are things we can do. Pardon? Coaching, yeah.
Yes.
Well, we were talking about that earlier. Ronnie's a shining example of. Are you in your 70s?
I'm 70.
You're 70. Okay. Ronnie was an executive in Apple and retired, and immediately started learning a whole new way of doing things. She's become a painter, she's doing sculpture, she's doing watercolor, and she's volunteering in the schools as a coach. This is an interesting point. I think we all can use a coach. The recent New Yorker has an article by Atul Gawande, who's a physician, and he realizes that he has become static. Doesn't feel like he's been moving. And he gets himself a coach who comes and observes him and makes suggestions as to how he can improve. Now, we've been doing this in the schools for a long time. When I was teaching in the Berkeley Public Schools, there was an opportunity for us to be videotaped. And very few teachers were willing to try it. This is the thing, you've got to try it. And what I learned in being videotaped was that I talked to the blackboard. I have my back to the class, and I'm saying, blah, 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 and I realized nobody could understand what I was saying. So it's those kind of insights that we can get if we're willing to say, yeah, I can learn, because the process of learning is ongoing.
You're talking about a tremendous openness to life, right? Somebody says, do you want to do that? And rather than the no, it's a yes. Which reminds me very much what they teach in improvisational theater.
Exactly.
One of the first things they teach you is learning to not block. Because it's our normal tendency to, when somebody makes all kinds of suggestions, to say no. or maybe not now, or maybe later. And one of the first things you have to learn in improvisation theater is yes, everything. Here's some blue acid. Would you like that? Yes. Let me take a look at that. I think I better pour that down the drain. You know, so that you work with it. You're continually in the flow with it, right? That's also part of the whole acting philosophy that Stagebridge has, yes?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think there we can utilize the younger people in our community to give us ideas, and
yes.
we can join in.
Yes, and actually have that intergenerational exchange.
I think so.
That's right. Well, thank you, Rhoda. Thank you, everyone, for coming. That was wonderful. We're waiting for the next book to come out. When is the next book coming out? Or the next play? The collective works?
Well, what I'm aiming for, and I don't know whether I'll make it or not, when I'm 95, I hope to have 5 10-minute plays that I'm happy with.
Uh-huh.
And then I'll get a space of some kind and have a reading of the 5
Oh,
plays.
beautiful. Good.
But you know, it doesn't matter if it never happens. It doesn't make any difference. I mean, that's what I am aiming for. But it's okay, because the process, it's the process of the creativity that is important. And that's what we are so gifted with, that it's just incredible that we are the way we are.
Thank you, Rhoda.
Thank you.